Welcome to the Let's Go podcast, where we help the leaders of entrepreneurial companies take their companies to the next level. Today, we're talking about designing an effective recruiting process. Here with me again is Amy Ancira, talent whisperer at Hire Better. Amy, thanks again for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me again. This is one of those really wonderful topics for me I could talk about all day. And I'm excited to talk about today's topic around how do we design an interview process that's attractive.
So let me tee a few things up, and let me just say most recruiting, people think of just that seat I need to fill. Let's get somebody in that seat as fast as humanly possible. But I want you to go through the stages and the steps involved in a good, effective recruiting process.
So phase one in our opinion, is scoping. And it's what I talked about earlier around foundational pieces. It's how do I build the right blueprints, right? So scoping is where you ask yourself and your team, how does a position dovetail with and drive our overall business strategy? So you're looking at expectations for the role, outcomes for the role, what you want them to achieve in the next 6 months to a year that are going to drive that business strategy, who's going to report to them, who they will report to. It's all of the really specifics that are company related that don't have anything to do so much with necessarily with the job, right? You can pull a job description, but these are the things that are specific to your business.
So I was going to ask you, I've got a job description. I've got what I need, right, Amy?
Yeah, no, you don't. You've got a job description and that's great, but there's a whole lot more that goes into it besides the job description. Absolutely. You got metrics, you got KPIs, you got to understand what you want those people to achieve. You need to understand what kind of a temperament do they need to have based on, what your team looks like. Do they need to have management experience? Do they need to have team building experience? There's a lot of specifics that go into understanding a role.
You just listed a lot. Let me invite the viewers to reach out to us. Just go to our website, hirebetter.com, if you'd like. Have some consultation, maybe a free scoping exercise. We're happy to help you build out that right blueprint. All right. So Amy, what's step number 2?
So step number 2 is sourcing. And sourcing is kind of the magic sauce around search. And that's really building your talent pool. That's looking at competitors. That's looking at speakers. That's reaching out to your network and identifying a pool of candidates that are going to be a fit for your position.
You said speakers. I assume you mean speakers at different trade shows, conferences, whatnot?
Yeah. I mean, you think about who thought leaders are, and you're looking for people who are thought leaders and subject matter experts. And those people are typically sought after for speaking engagements and to be in membership organizations.
Nice.
Another great source. Yeah.
But the key is people who aren't looking for a job, right?
People who aren't looking for a job.
Well, tell me about step number 3.
So step number 3 is the interview process. And the interview process is really critical. What we've seen through most of our work is that most companies, most hiring managers don't know how to interview. So it's really important that you get this part right.
So in the old days, I would be printing the resume of the candidate I'm going to speak with on my way to the conference room to meet with them. You're telling me there's something more involved than that?
Oh yeah, it's much more involved than that. And what we see is that companies will have hiring managers go in and they won't even be prepared for the interview. So they'll ask, a stock list of 5 questions. And then a week later, the candidate will come in for another interview and the next person in the interview process will ask the same stock 5 questions. And when you think about best practices and being on the receiving end of that, it's probably not the way you'd want to interview.
Yeah, I can't imagine A players like to hear, people not be prepared for an interview. You're not really selling your company if you're not prepared. I like some of the stuff that you guys do with giving each person in the interview process a different role. For example, the team doesn't let me truly interview because I like everybody. The team asked me to sell the vision of Hire Better. And I know you do the same thing for our clients as well.
And you also, I think, are a good assess for culture. But we wouldn't ask you to assess somebody's financial acumen, right? Or their sales acumen or their delivery acumen. We would ask the people that are experts in that field to touch on the questions that they need to. So you're getting an interview process that's very well-rounded, where a candidate might be asked different questions by each subject matter expert, and then they come together and they've got a cohesive idea of the candidate as a whole.
We're on to step number 4.
So step number 4 is negotiating your offer. And, we talked about earlier in the foundational pieces of this series, how important it is to understand what the mission and the vision and the selling of the opportunity is. That happens in the interview process a little bit. It also happens in negotiating the offer. And, I know we said that was critical, but in today's market, with the dynamics around salary and counter offers being rampant, negotiating the offer is really important. And so understanding what market is going to bear for the different levels that you're hiring for, it's really critical.
Guys, if you're interested, we would be happy to supply some salary surveys. We have access to a lot of data. Just reach out to us at hirebetter.com and we'll be happy to connect with you. Just realize that even the salary surveys that we have today are a little bit out of date because the market is moving so fast. I would add 15 to 20% to most of these salary surveys.
Yeah, you just took the words out of my mouth, Kurt. I was just about to interrupt you and say, but wait. But the thing that's great about the work that we do is because we're in the market actively, we can triangulate, against salary survey versus what we've seen for recent offers, and the gut check that we can give around the searches that we've conducted more recently.
I like it. I think one of the important things for most of you entrepreneurs out there is don't lowball your candidates. You're not going to get a game-changing candidate if you come in with a lowball offer and try to negotiate them to something really, really minuscule. Go know what you need and go out and get it.
Well, and there's a point that I'd like to make around that, Kurt, and it's that you might get somebody to accept a lowball offer, but they're going to be looking actively. It's not like they're going to come on board and be happy. They're going to continue to entertain offers because I can tell you most candidates are getting 5 to 10 reach outs a day right now.
Wow. All right. Well, what's step number 5, Amy?
So step number 5 is onboarding. And I always say this, onboarding actually starts in the interview process because it's all about setting the right vision for the candidate. It's all about making the right first impression. But onboarding is really about how do you bring the candidate into your business? And that's really, so much of that, it's about planning. So it's about putting together 30, 60, 90-day plans and making sure that they have a great first day, a great first week, and a great first month and onward.
Yeah, that's so critical. I see so many people who are just, hey, bathrooms on, second floor, and here's your computer.
Yeah, we actually had a client that gave the candidate a computer and pointed him to his desk, and that was the extent of his onboarding. And now he's a flight risk. He's looking because his experience has proven to be equally unimpressive as he's been an employee over the last couple of weeks.
Yep, we've got to continue. Not necessarily selling, but continuing to build that relationship over that first 90 days, guys, so that you can get off on the right foot because first impressions are really, really so important.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, Amy, anything else you'd like to add about designing an effective recruiting process?
Well, if there's anything I'll say, it's understand your team, understand what your hiring manager's capabilities are. The fact of the matter is that unless you worked at a large company like a Dell or an Intel, et cetera, most people have not had formal training around the hiring and interviewing process. So if your team doesn't have it, you need to invest the money and invest the time to make sure that they get up to speed. Because if you don't have the right inputs, you're not going to get the right outputs.
Amy, a couple of questions I get a lot from clients is how do you deal with assessments, like personality assessments, as well as interviewing techniques?
That's one of those things that's so important to get right. We've worked with clients that use assessments as a knockout tool. And when you do that, you're missing out on a huge proportion of candidates that would be a wonderful fit for a position. So if you're going to use an assessment, my advice would be to pick one judiciously and then use it just as a data point, right? People are complex beings and an assessment is just one part of the picture.
So when you say don't use it as a knockout, you mean don't kick people out just because they didn't get the proper score that you're looking for in the assessment, but use it as a data point, I think is what you just said.
Exactly. I think that what we've seen from certain clients is that they use it as a filter on the front end of a search. And so they're filtering out all kinds of great talent that would be a fit, but they've set an arbitrary parameter around what a person should look like. And again, people are complex and they show up with the head, they show up with the heart, and they show up with their experience.
Well, so what about interview techniques?
Another really interesting one, what we've all been trained on, and I think the model that's the most successful is behavioral interviewing. And I referenced this again earlier in the process when we were talking about the importance of core values. It's behavioral interviews is about tell me about a time when, right? Tell me about a time when X. And when you're asking those questions rather than yes, no questions, you get a lot more meat on the bone around how somebody's built and how they're geared.
Well, one final thing I just thought of is reference checks. I know that there's a couple of schools of thoughts on that. Tell me what your school of thought is.
My school of thought is you get great information. There are people that are pessimist about it because they say, oh, well, those are references that were provided me. Of course, they're not going to say anything negative. What we've found is that they have a lot of really positive things to say, coaching aspects that we can use around management, how they like to communicate, autonomy, all kinds of really great things that we can build into an onboarding and a training program for them.
Nice. Amy, what is the one big takeaway from this section, designing an effective recruiting process?
So my big takeaway, Kurt, is to make sure that your team is trained on interviewing. They need to know the process for interviewing and the questions to ask to get the right candidate.
I love it. Thanks again for joining me, Amy. That wraps episode 4, designing an effective recruitment process. And join us next time for episode 5, retaining top talent in today's market. See you next time. If you guys need any help with any of the stuff we talked about today, please reach out to me, Kurt at hirebetter.com, or Amy.Ancira, Ancira at hirebetter.com.